Good evening. On our podcast today, we're going to talk about literacy and how, in order to be able to learn, in order to understand, we need to feel understood. And to be able to be the best teacher you can be, you need to communicate so people understand you, but you also need to make people feel that you understand them. Tricky sometimes. And in leadership, how can we make sure that teachers feel comfortable enough so that they want to see how they can help students, make sure that they make students feel understood, but also feel comfortable enough to share that sometimes learning needs to happen or share with the teachers what they've learned so we can all grow as professionals. And these are the topics for tonight. It's going to be exciting. And let's see if the sound is great. From sound is great. The reason why we're having the podcast today on Thursday is that I missed schedule my podcast for yesterday. Somehow yesterday I didn't think we were at Wednesday, and therefore that happens. The reason why literacy is important for me this week, we have a professional development day this week, and I decided to lead a workshop, and it will be on literacy. And when I think of literacy, I'm thinking about communicating so that people can understand what needs to be learned, but also knowing that learning always works better when everybody feels understood. So that is the main topics for today. So as usual, we are having three segments. The first segment is about learning, about 10 minutes. Second segment will be on teaching, and the third segment will be on leadership. If you don't know me, my name is Alain Faber. I've been teaching, this is my 25th teaching year, and I thought that the podcast would be a great way for me to share what I know. And I'm supposed to show students how to do a podcast this year in a new course I'm teaching. So if I want to teach about podcasting, may as well have one so I know what I'm talking about. And that is also part of the topic for tonight. So if you are new to my channel, don't hesitate to subscribe. I'm always discussing interesting topic, and it's always beautiful to see you here. First segment is on the idea that if you think of literacy and learning, the key question here is learning happens if the students or the learner is open to the information that comes to them. So the first thing we have to realize is that the language skills are very important. So for example, if you are teaching in English or French or in any other languages, what's important is to have the vocabulary, the know-how to use the language so that you can read information in that language, so that you can write. And just not writing words, you want to be able to write so that you can uh, carry a message. And when you read, you want to be able to understand the message of the text you're reading. If it happens that you're thinking about listening, you can listen to words in fact the same way we listen to music, but you also need to understand the message behind what you're listening. And when you are speaking in a presentation or with friends or co-worker and so on, you need to be able to have the vocabulary to share the information that you want. So that means that you have the information so that you can communicate, but you communicate so that understanding happen. So that is the first thing. So a lot of the work is done when people learn a new language in learning the language, skills, structure, how to improve quickly literacy. And the beauty of the school system is when you have a new immigrant, a newcomer to where you live, what happens is we have it's called an immersion. You move in the area where everybody speaks English at the school and in your area. That means that English will be so much easier to learn because it's all around you. Now, learning is not just knowing about the skills, because you can teach the skills as much as you want, but at some point, you need to have students that are receptive. So, my second part here is when I think of learning, I always think about the idea of input and output. So, I do believe that students, before they can communicate all kind of information, they need to have input. So they need to have information coming in, they need to hear the language, they need to read, they need to do hands-on activities. So a lot of information gets in them. I call it input. And then after a while, give them a couple weeks, then they can have some output. For example, in my science class, for the first few weeks in a new unit, we do a lot of hands-on activities. We learn new vocabulary words. We read texts. We get people to answer questions. We have little debates. We have the whiteboards where students need to share what they know from discussions or prior learning. That's important because only then will they have a lot of information coming in and then feel comfortable enough to be able to speak in a group, to be able to share information, and also have the confidence to do that. So, if when they have enough information, then output is possible. For little kids, that happens a lot. You have some kids that they will be in an environment, they will listen for a long time. Some people start talking at 10 months, 11 months. Some kids start talking at a year and a half. And the reason is those kids needed a bit more time, a bit more listening, a bit more immersion in the language to build the vocabulary and the confidence to be able to use the language. And these are so important. So here we talked about the language skills, input for the output. Now there's something that happens in our mind when we learn. We get information in, that's the input, but we also have an interpretation of the information based on your experience. So every student in your class, every team member in your team have different life experiences. That means that they will interpret information in different ways. That means that when you share information to them, the conclusion they may have will be different based on who they are and their beliefs. So when you are to get to know a group, one important thing is to get to know them in like a more in depth, so that you have an idea of how they learn and also their perspective when they're put in a situation where they need to learn. Too often, you see, well, students come in and then they're ready to learn. It's not that easy. Now, a student may come in and then say, okay, I'm ready to learn, but there's also an extra layer we have to keep in mind. For a learner to be able to learn, they have to feel that the person teaching them understand them. So that means that the audience need to feel understood in the situation. So, for example, I teach science this semester, and I think it's the third time I teach the course, maybe the second time in English. And I'm learning new language, new words all the time, and I'm practicing all the time. And students find it interesting, especially the English learners, how uh, they see me get better in the language, and that gives them confidence. When I teach in a French immersion program, the same way. My French is very good, and they're learning French. And on the opposite side, their English is very good, and I'm learning my English as I go along. So at this, when you think about it, there's a how can I say that? There's an understanding that we're at a place where we understand each other. The students feel understood, and by feeling understood, often that's that one thing that gets them to say, okay, the teacher is there for me. I feel understood. Let's see if I can learn what they have to say. Because if a student doesn't feel understood, then there's a wall that happens right between the student and the teacher. It could happen between a student and another student. It happens between people, between adults as well. When you don't feel understood, then you're more on the defensive. And it's much harder to collaborate in a classroom, much harder to collaborate in a team setting at work. So these are important things to keep in mind, especially when you think that a learner to come in, they just have to know the language, sit down, or get going with the learning. But it's more than that. They need to get the language skill, they need to build the confidence to be able to collaborate, but also feeling understood is so important for them so that they say, okay, I'm willing to take the risk to learn with you. And that brings us to our second segment about teaching. Um, I often say that learning and teaching is very similar because when you teach, you have to learn often what you have to teach. But teaching is a learning adventure because even if you feel that you can teach something, it doesn't mean that the group in front of you is willing to learn. In my previous segment, I did talk about how to best set up your environment, your classroom, to make sure that students feel that they are ready and let's see, willing to learn with you. So in my teaching segment, I want to talk to the fact that in high school, often even in a team setting, when you have a teacher or a trainer, they come in and they say, "I know what needs to be learned." And the big question as a trainer or a teacher is that you can teach, you can share information, but the big thing is you need to make sure that your pupils, your students, your teammates, the people working with you or under you, those people need to understand your message. So one of the teachers' responsibility is to make sure that whatever they say, whatever they teach, whatever the training they're giving on, they need to make sure that people understand what is being taught. Too often, I don't know if it has happened to you, and you can put it in the comment below. You go to a session somewhere, you go to a conference, you watch a video about a training, and then you listen for 10 minutes and you don't know what the person has been talking about for that long. And it makes it hard because you try to say, okay, there's something to be learned, but somehow it's not happening. And often it's because the teacher or the trainer, they know what they have to do, but they don't keep in mind that people need to understand the message they're trying to give. I was telling my students about something interesting, and I'm going to share it with you. When people are sharing information, when they know what they have to say, usually sentences can be prompt, they're short, they're precise, people know what they're saying. On the other hand, I don't know if you can see that, I use the idea of beautiful sentences. And the reason for that is when someone has less understanding of what they have to teach, then what happens is they start using beautiful sentences. And at some point, it gets harder for people to understand the message. Because if you look at the first two letters, beautiful sentences, and in my class, sometimes I circle them. So beautiful sentences are great. It's just words, fillers, hoping that people understand the main thing. It's not good enough. As a teacher, you need to make sure that you're using the proper vocabulary, and you need to be clear to make sure that understanding is possible. But that means that you've worked quite a bit with your team, quite a bit with your classes, so that you know that you've shared with the group the language skills, the new vocabulary, the new acronym, the new procedures, because once people know that, then they can have a more they can collaborate and have a much more, let's see, positive contribution. That's quite important. And I was saying, okay, so let's see. So we have a teacher, we've got lessons, we've got growth. That's always amazing. On the other hand, you may know teachers, you may know trainers where you go through their sessions, and after an hour, you've got students getting or team members. They go to get a coffee or they go to the library and they try to figure out what just happened. It does happen. And the idea here is that it's not the teacher is not necessarily good. It's the teacher did not take the time to make sure that they did not take the time to make sure that the students were receptive, that they felt that the people learning felt understood, and therefore they just went on with the training. And the problem was that the students or the colleagues or the trainees were just not ready at that time. And so if you look at I'm going to talk about this, the next point in the leadership. So what I want to share as well is, okay, so when you are teaching, the whole idea is that you have an output towards them and you want them to understand. In order to have the best output as a trainer and a teacher, what you need is you need to have done a lot of learning. a lot of discussions with others, a lot of debate, so that you feel comfortable with the subject. The more comfortable you are with the subject, the easier it is for you to take questions, the easier it is for you to pivot if you notice that your group is not quite as receptive as you thought they would be. Because pivoting for some it's the end of the world, and for others, well, it's one step towards learning. I think it's quite important, and and that's why often the tutoring industry is going so well. You have teachers that are amazing teachers teaching, but some of the students, either they have missed some information from the past, and therefore there's some things that would have been needed at the time, and or at some point the students were not receptive enough to understand what they were trying to do. And I'm not saying that it's the teacher's fault. There's so many things happening here. There are the skills of the teachers, the language skills of the teachers and the students. There's also the environment at the trainees, for the trainer or the school. There's also the environment at home, the community, and also stresses that sometimes we don't always understand, regardless if they're teenagers or young adults or older adults. There are stressors in their lives, and that is sometimes a factor that makes people either receptive to learning or not. Because once you are in a situation where there are stressors, then you're more into a survival mode. And once you're in a survival mode, what happens is that it's not time to learn at the time. It's time for you just to stay afloat and make sure that you get through the situation. So as a teacher, it's important for you to be able to read the crowd. It is important for you to be mindful of the people with you. If it's part of a team, it's important to say, okay, what is happening in the team, to make sure that all the teammates are ready to do what they need to do. And sometimes it could be just a conversation. Sometimes it could be a 5-minute break. Sometimes it's just being able to go for a walk. Or you know what? Sometimes it's just an hour to deal with what needs to happen. All of this is important for adults, but it's also important for students. Today in my class, it was Thursday, so tomorrow is a PD day. So tomorrow there's no school. So in the afternoon, I was saying, okay, I'm going to give you some free time to work on a project that is due early next week. And I said, if it happens that you're done what we need to do for next week, then you can work on other subjects so that you can have less homework over the weekend. And then there was one student, and the one student took a book from another class right at the beginning, and then started to do some other work. So I said, okay. So I want to talk to the person and say, okay, I noticed that you're reading from another class. I want to make sure you're done with your project. And she says, no, I'm not quite done with the project. On the other hand, I was in the other class, and I have 2 more pages to read in the chapter, and I just want to finish the chapter. So I know what is happening there, so that I can free my mind to go to the next project. And I said, well, that's such a good idea. Because if I say, no, put your book aside, then the students would have been in her mind, there's an unfinished story, unfinished line of a discussion in the book. And then there's energy being spent there trying to work on the project. It took her 7 or 8 minutes. She put her book away. And guess what? She was able to work on the project right away. So here is just understanding that being rigid in a situation may not be the best thing in that case. And that brings me to the third segment here. And the third segment is about leadership. And the reason why I mentioned that is we are a leader either as a student, as a team member, as a teacher, but also as a leader in your school. And if you think about it, we are all leaders in our own lives in all kind of times in the day. So here is what I have. So for leadership, my note was learning. Learning to happen. Okay, so if you think of leadership, either leadership as a teacher or department head, what you need to realize is that your team needs to be ready to teach. So that means that sometimes there are changes in curriculum, Sometimes there are changes in the environment of the school, in the environment of the community, or maybe even their home environment. So what happens is you need to make sure that the teachers are ready and willing to say, okay, we need to do some learning so that we can help students with literacy, numeracy, or any other initiative that may be in your school board. Because if you think about that, teachers, as a leader, teachers are people that are still learning. If you're a leader, that means you may have been a teacher and now you can help teachers to be better teachers. So if you go to university as a teacher, you're a student teacher and therefore you're still learning. If you're part of a leadership team, you can have, for example, a junior director, and then you have a director, and then a senior director. So here again, you have different level. And it's not one is better than the other. It's all about the journey, how much the person knows, what is the literacy of the person. So knowing the language, knowing the procedure so that they can function very well in the environment. Because if you have teachers that are not ready to learn, then it's harder for them to be able to share the information about what needs to be communicated. So my next point here is teachers need to get to know their students. So as a leader, you need to realize that your teachers are there because they are taking care of people above all. If you're a leader in a company and you have a team, you have to realize that there's the human factor that is quite important in running a team. Because if you don't take care of the human factor, what happens is that you become you do what you do for the sake of doing it. You may not celebrate your wins as much as needed. And what happens is that if you get busy, then you get into the rat race. And then you lose this idea that we're all humans. And then we need to appreciate what we are doing. There's no point in doing what we're doing and then get burnt out in the long run because you haven't been able to appreciate the present moment. So that means that if you're part of a team as a leader, going and seeing your teammates, the people, and say, okay, just have a chat one-on-one just to see how things are, and not just about business. Just ask a few things about themselves and how things are going. That will have teachers feel that you are interested in them. Second, your teammates will feel that they are better understood, and therefore your team will work much better. Same thing in a school. If you talk with your teachers, you get to know them, then teachers feel more understood. And therefore, when you have new initiatives, new ideas, it's easier for them to say, okay, something new, I know they have to do so let's see if we can be part of the group. And it's part of culture. And the culture it's not something that you say, okay, I need to have a culture and have a mission statement, a vision, and that's the only thing that is needed to make it work. It's everybody together getting to know each other, helping each other, so that above all, we just want to all feel successful. Want to feel successful as leaders, but also as teachers, as trainers, as managers, as well as students. The other one here I have, teachers need to feel comfortable. Oh, that's a good one. As a leader, you need to find a way to make teachers feel comfortable in bringing the best they can in a situation. So that means that you want teachers to feel comfortable to share information. You want teachers to feel that if there's something they could improve, to share it. Because if a teacher can share what could be improved, then the whole team can work better. If a teacher shares an idea about what they could improve in a program, then the whole program gets better. And that works the same way in a classroom. If you have trainees or students, if they are in a situation where they feel comfortable enough to ask questions, to question what is being done at this time, then it gives confidence to the students to say, okay, we're in a learning environment, we're all learning, we're all here to get better. If you're teachers are working together, knowing that we're all together to be better. And as leaders, the idea here is not to find a way to show your teachers what they need to do. All teachers are professionals. They know what to do. What you have to do is just be there for them. If they have questions, to make sure they're feeling comfortable enough to ask the questions. And then as a leader is to do, what can I do to make my teacher's life easier? If you're a teacher, what can I do to my students to make their life easier? If you're a trainer, what can I do to make my trainees' life easier? If you're a manager, how can I make my teammates, my team feel more comfortable? And often it could be just little things. For example, uh, the we have a coffee machine in our office. It's a little thing. If there's a coffee machine for everybody, someone feels like they want coffee, they make coffee not just for themselves, but for everybody. It's a little thing. One teacher takes the leadership to do so one day, and another day it's another person. But what happens is that it's just people saying, okay, we understand each other, we are there for each other. So that is quite important. And these are the topics I wanted to share today. First topic so the main topic today is about literacy, how to use literacy to make sure that when you communicate, people understand what you're saying, understand the message, but also if you to realize that in order to learn, you also need above the language to feel that you are understood and that what you're learning matters. So all of this is important for us. So today in the learning segment, we talked about the fact that learning skills are important. We need to work on input to make sure that students and trainees and team members know information so they feel comfortable. And when they have enough of it, then they have the confidence to move forward to create output, amazing presentation, work on sales, work on projects. For teachers, it's important for them to know that they're teaching, therefore they are sharing information, but they need to know that they need to share information so that others, their audience, need to understand what they're trying to say and they understand the message of the lesson. So that's quite important. And in order to do so, showing that you understand your audience, make them feel that they understood, is so much easier for you, and it changes the chemistry of the whole group, the whole team. And for leaders, knowing that in order for learning to happen, people need to be professionals. They need to know a lot of things. They need to learn, but they also need to feel comfortable about what they can do, but also learn and be comfortable to question the situation to make sure that they can make the team, they can make the classroom, they can make the school, they can make your company the best company it can be. And that is my podcast for today. Thank you very much for being here tonight. I enjoyed the discussion with you. I'm still looking at the next topics and seeing if I can invite people on this podcast as part of the evolution of what I'm trying to do here. Basically, as well, I'm learning, it's exciting, but I'm also trying to figure out the ins and out of podcasts so I can be a better teacher teaching about podcasts. On this, have an amazing day. Look on the channel. There's all kind of videos. It's amazing. Happy to have you here, and I'll see you in the next video, and next week, next Wednesday at 7:30 in the next podcast. On this, take care. Bye-bye.